Hello everyone, welcome to DTech. DeepSeek has introduced two reasoning models, DeepSeek-R1-Zero and DeepSeek-R1. If you look into the performance of these models on various benchmarks, we can see the flagship model from DeepSeek, which is DeepSeek-R1, with performance with OpenAI O1 model. We can see on various benchmarks, it is performing better than OpenAI, or it's almost performing equal to OpenAI models. This is really great, but there are a lot of other great things about DeepSeek. First one is it is completely open source. That means we can download these models in our local and we can actually experiment on these models as well. The second thing is they spent roughly around $6 million on training, which means not even 1/10 of the cost that other companies are spending on training these models. And the other thing is US has restricted to sell their top GPUs to China. Unlike US AI Labs, DeepSeek, the Chinese company, does not have access to the latest GPUs that are coming out from NVIDIA. With these limitations and the budget of $6 million, how DeepSeek is able to meet the accuracy that is matching with top-notch models in AI landscape. In this video, we are going to look into the DeepSeek research paper and the evolution of DeepSeek-R1-Zero and DeepSeek-R1 models, and finally we'll also look into distillation where DeepSeek empowered the small language models. The main idea or hypothesis behind DeepSeek models are traditionally if you take any large language models, first it will undergo supervised fine-tuning before applying any reinforcement learning. But what DeepSeek believes that the reasoning capabilities of the model can be improved by applying reinforcement directly to the base model without applying any supervised fine-tuning. This is something completely new concept and no one has experimented with it before. To test this idea, researchers started working on DeepSeek-R1-Zero. This is a high-level diagram which is explaining DeepSeek-R1-Zero pipeline. In the first step, we can see here, DeepSeek uses the base model which is called DeepSeek V3 model here. And the simple prompt we can see here, a conversation between user and assistant. The user asks a question and the assistant solves it. It's basically a very simple prompt. And they have very big datasets sitting somewhere. And the dataset consists of different data, basically questions and all of that. And this particular question each time will be added to this prompt, and this particular prompt will be sent to DeepSeek V3 model. Once the prompt is given to DeepSeek V3 model, which is base model in our case, it will generate multiple outputs for the given question. In the second stage, we can see here DeepSeek uses reward modeling. Here it uses two different rewards. One is accuracy reward, another one is format rewards. Accuracy reward will validate the output generated by the base model and assign a reward to the output. Basically, if you ask a question, what is 15 multiplied by 4? And DeepSeek V3 model comes up with different outputs like 60, 61, 54, 55, and 60 is answer, something like that. And what this reward modeling will do, based on the accuracy of the output, it will assign reward score. So this will get a high reward, this will get a low reward, and this will get a low reward as well. This will get a low reward. This will also get some sort of reward, but comparatively this reward, it will get less reward here as well. And the next one is format reward. In the prompt itself, they mentioned one thing here, which is the reasoning process and answer are enclosed within the tags. Basically what they're telling is, if the model is thinking about particular question, then that particular thing should be there in between think open and close tags. And the answer should be in the different tags as well. If the generated output from DeepSeek V3 model follows that particular format, then that particular output will be rewarded as high. If it is not generated in the correct format, then the output will be rewarded as low. So these are the two reward models that will be used in DeepSeek-R1-Zero. Once the rewards are calculated, it will go to the next stage, which is reinforcement learning. In DeepSeek-R1-Zero model, DeepSeek team used a very new approach called GRPO reinforcement learning. GRPO is completely a new approach to the reinforcement learning. So GRPO is nothing but group relative policy optimization, and we need to discuss in detail about GRPO because this is what it helped DeepSeek to reduce the training costs significantly. What is GRPO? Traditionally, to train any large language models, there are a lot of reinforcement learning approaches. But the most prominent one is PPO, which is nothing but proximal policy optimization. But DeepSeek didn't take the most prominent one, which is PPO. They took completely a different approach called GRPO. So we need to understand the difference between PPO and GRPO and what are the key issues with PPO approach and how GRPO address those issues. In proxy policy optimization, we have two models. You can see the first model, which is actor model, and the other model is critic model. Actor model will generate the output for a given question. So basically it will generate the output for a given question. And the critic model will evaluate the output and provide feedback to the actor model. So basically it will do all the brain here and then it will give the feedback back to actor model. And actor model will take the feedback and it will update the weights based on backward propagation and all of that, and the process will go on. As we can see here, there are two models required here. One is to generate the output, which is the actor model here, and the second one is to evaluate that particular response and provide the feedback back to the actor model. All right. For example, if you're training a 7 billion parameter model, you need two models in inference. One is actor model with 7 billion parameters, and another one is a critic model, which is also almost equals to 7 billion parameters. So those two models needs to be in inference to provide feedback and generate outputs for us. This particular approach has a drawback that we need to maintain two models in inference, which will make the computation super expensive. This is where exactly GRPO comes into the picture, and it eliminates the critic model altogether. That's really good, but how it will be validating the response generated by the actor model without having a critic model? So basically how it works. So GRPO compares multiple responses generated by the policy model or actor model and ranks them relative to one another. So let's try to understand this with an example here. For example, we are asking a question, what is 15 multiplied by 4? The model generates multiple answers to that, and the format of the response is output, probability, and reward. And we can see here the first output, which is 60 is the output, and the probability score is 0.4 and the reward is 1.0. And the second output is 65, which is incorrect, and the probability score is 0.3 and reward score is 0.2. The third output is 50 and the probability score is 0.2 and reward is 0.1. And the fourth output is 60 is the correct answer. We can see here this response is generated in string format, not in number format, but we're asking about here a mathematics problem, so it should be generating the response in integer format so that it will be easier to read. And then the probability score is 0.1 and the reward is 0.8. So far we have 4 outputs generated by the base model. We will look into the full equation of GRPO in the later stage, but in GRPO what we have is a calculation of advantage function. So we took here the advantage function from the GRPO. The advantage function is nothing but the reward of the output minus mean of all the rewards divided by standard deviation of the rewards. So for that, first let's calculate mean reward. So mean reward is nothing but we have to give the rewards of all the 4 outputs. We can see here 1.0, 0.2, 0.1 and 0.8 divided by 4, which is closely equals to 0.525. And we will calculate the standard deviation of all the outputs, and which is approximately equals to 0.4. We'll plug in these numbers into this equation and calculate the advantage function for the first output. A1 equals to reward for the first output, which is 1.0, and standard deviation, which is 0.525, divided by standard deviation, which is 0.4, which is equals to 1.1875. Similarly, we will calculate the advantage function for second output, third output, and fourth output. From these outputs, we can see here second and third outputs get the negative advantage because these outputs are incorrect. And first and last will get the positive advantages, but the first output will get the highest advantage because it is the correct value. So this is how the advantage function will be calculated in GRPO. Instead of using critic model, it is actually relying on the advantage function to evaluate the response of the model. Finally, the full equation of GRPO is here. And we can see here, this is the advantage function. And we have also used clipping and KL divergence here. So these two concepts are help the model to overcome the overfitting problem. In summary, what we discussed so far is, in the first step, we have created multiple outputs generated by the base model from the given question here, and rewards will be calculated based on the accuracy and format in the second stage, and in the subsequent stage GRPO reinforcement learning is applied to the model and the weights are updated during the model training. Once the training is over, it's time for performance check. As we can see, the reasoning capabilities of R1-Zero with OpenAI O1 Mini and O1-0912 models, DeepSeek performed better than OpenAI O1 model in some benchmarks, whereas OpenAI performed better in live code bench and code forces. These results will confirm that the idea of using reinforcement learning in initial step helped the models to perform better in reasoning tasks. The aha moment. So it's an interesting observation during the training of DeepSeek-R1-Zero up. When the model given with this math problem, which is here, we can see here it responded back with saying, wait, that's an aha moment I can flag here. It sounded more like a human, right? This is like a power of reinforcement learning, I would say. So this is really great. DeepSeek-R1-Zero is, if you look at the benchmarks, it is performing better than O1 Mini and O1-0912. But there are some limitations with the DeepSeek-R1-Zero. The model often struggles with poor readability and language mixing. That means like whenever it's generating the response, it is always, it's most often mixed a couple of languages into the response. So most often it's not in a readable format. Now it's time for DeepSeek-R1. This is the flagship model from DeepSeek. To address the issues faced by DeepSeek-R1-Zero, researchers introduced new model called DeepSeek-R1. If you look into the model pipeline, it started with supervised fine-tuning. Why they use supervised fine-tuning after all of this discussion? They should be using reinforcement learning in the initial step, right? That's right. That's what they did for DeepSeek-R1-Zero. Because of the language mixture and poor readability issues, researchers started with supervised fine-tuning. The data is coming from DeepSeek-R1-Zero outputs. So basically, the DeepSeek-R1-Zero is really helped to train DeepSeek-R1 model. As discussed in the first step, instead of reinforcement learning, DeepSeek-R1 has a cold start, which means supervised dataset that they used, and then they fine-tune the model by using that supervised dataset. In the next step, it used reward modeling, which is similar to what we see in the DeepSeek-R1-Zero. They used two rewards, accuracy and format reward, and there is another reward that they also used, which is nothing but language reward, because there are some issues with the language in the DeepSeek-R1-Zero. To overcome that, they actually introduced new reward called language reward as well. In the subsequent steps, it actually used GRPO as reinforcement learning, which is similar to what we see in DeepSeek-R1-Zero. And finally, they used other reinforcement learning steps as well. This is purely for the model to actually better filter in harmful content and all of that. If you look into the performance of DeepSeek-R1 models, which we discussed previously as well, it's almost matching with OpenAI O1 models. It's almost, you can see here in various benchmarks, it's almost equals to OpenAI models and sometimes even performing better than OpenAI models as well. Finally, we are adding into distillation. What is distillation? Distillation is a technique that involves a large pre-trained model known as the teacher model, transferring its knowledge to a smaller model, or we call it as student model. It will try to preserve as much performance as possible. DeepSeek used the DeepSeek-R1 model to fine-tune open source models such as Qwen, Llama 3.2 with 800k samples that are actually curated from DeepSeek-R1. And if you look at the results are outstanding. Right, the distillation approach significantly boosts the reasoning skills of smaller models. Let's look into the evaluations of these models here. The most prominent one, Qwen 32 billion parameters one, which we can see here, it actually performing better than O1 Mini, O1 400 as well. And we can see Llama 70 billion performing better than OpenAI models. And the links for the research paper is actually mentioned in the description. And the article that I actually referred is also mentioned in the description. Thank you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next.